We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 5, episode number 4. And yeah, we here at the weekend, man. And finally got through another hard-working week for most of us, man. And we finally get into the weekend as we got a lot going on across the sporting landscape coming up this weekend, man. And first and foremost, if it's your first time listening, we on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide high-fire takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And if you're OG of the show, man, we appreciate the check-in once again. Don't forget, man, to check us out, man, on Podbean, and also too, all podcasts can be listened to as well. We on Twitter at We on Fire Sports. Also too on YouTube, We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. Also too, rocking on Facebook. And there's a lot of stuff jumping off this weekend across the sporting landscape, man. NFL, National Football League, man, we going into week number 2. As we had the game last night, a good game between the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Commanders. The Packers was able to knock off the Commanders, man. And I'm not going to front, man. The Packers looking nice through the first 2 games of the season. 2 big wins for them, man, to jump off their season. You know, so we'll see what they do moving forward, man. A lot of people got them predicted as coming out of the NFC, man, this year, along with the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, the defending Super Bowl champions. And so, man, we're going to take a deep dive into week number 2, man, the rest of the slate. Also, I got our first guest of season number 5. I got my man E. Salim, Mr. Taylor Street, falling through from the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast. Man, you can check them boys out on YouTube at Firebox 2300. We definitely going to chop game, man, on week number 1, what occurred. Also, too, week number 2, we'll get into that a little bit as well. Also, too, we're going to talk a little bit about our Chicago Bears. Bears took a nice little L trying to bounce back in week number 2, so we'll get into that. Also, we got the big, huge fight jumping off, man, on Saturday, September 13th. Canelo Alvarez taking on Bud Crawford, man. These 2 guys are, superstars in the boxing realm. Bud, man, undefeated, man. Canelo, an international superstar, man. A lot of people think that, Bud moving up in weight is just taking a little bit too big of a bite at the apple. But I actually got Bud Crawford in this fight, man. I just think that he's a hungrier, guy. I think that for him, it's just another thing to check off his checklist. He's one of the greatest boxers of all time, man. We can argue about the list, but, if he goes according to plan, man, and get rid of Canelo Alvarez, I do think it will be a decision. I don't think it'll be a knockout. But if he's able to knock off Canelo Alvarez, man, the man has checked every single box throughout his career. Canelo, man, for him, great, outstanding boxer. But to me, I think he's taking a little bit off of that fastball, man. And we seen it in the Bivol fight. And so, a couple fights ago, say, with him. So, Bud is the creme de la creme, man. So I think it's going to be a good fight. So definitely on this one, man, we got a nice little slate. A lot of things to cover on this episode. We also, too, got Major League Baseball playoffs. Major League Baseball regular season going into the playoffs, man. The divisional race is getting tight. We'll circle back on Major League Baseball, man, next week as we got a nice little look at kind of what the playoff picture look like, across the Major League Baseball landscape. Also, too, we got the WNBA playoffs jumping off as well, man, coming up pretty soon as their regular season is coming to a conclusion also. So, man, we ain't gonna hold you, man. We're gonna get right into it, man. Coming up, I got my man E. Salim from the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast. We're gonna kick game across the National Football League. First and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. And, man, it's season 5, man, season 5. So, we got to bring in our Chi-Town correspondent, Bears correspondent, NFL correspondent, co-host of the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, my man E. Salim, Mr. Taylor Street in the building. What's going on, sir?
What's going on, my brother? We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. And happy to be here with you, my man. Happy to be here.
all day, man. And, it's definitely something that on, our end, we had a little disappointment last week, to say the least, with our Bears taking an L, man, on Monday Night Football, man. Just had everybody in Chicago just upset and just on one. So we're going to get right into it, man. What was your thoughts, man, of what you saw, man, on Monday night, man, with the Bears, man?
Trauma, PTSD. Just a lot of bad memories, man. It seems like, you can't ever get right. Bad news bears, all that type of stuff, man, that we always go through. From the Super Bowl against the Colts to ramming up now. We have, our third quarterback that we drafted top 10 or less. And it seems like it's just, we just can't get right, man. The Bears we came out, the whole city of Chicago was extremely excited. Man, our defense was looking great without some of our key players. Caleb Williams went 10 for 10, his first 10 passes. Everything was going pretty well. And then, it's just that we couldn't finish the game for whatever reason. It's a lot of things people saying why we didn't finish and a lot of stuff like that. But we got to just get it done, man. It was one of those situations where, I had a little function at my house. All the Bears fans was here. It was just a terrible way to just start the season. And it seems like we're just going through that same domino effect that we went through the previous season. So that was my first impression. And you kind of knew too when they didn't kick that field goal. It was like we all looking at each other like, why did they not kick the field goal? And everybody kind of sensed a comeback could possibly happen. And it was like inevitable, man. It just seems like it's not even the Bears' fault. Not even the offensive line. A lot of blame. It just seemed like that was just something that was meant to happen, just to put us in this type of misery phase right now. At least when that first when the game was over with. So that was like my initial impression with it.
Yeah, man, and yeah, just like most, man. I was disappointed, and it's funny because it seems like we all seen this story play out once again, man. And that's what made it kind of, sad from a standpoint of, here we go again. Offense looked good. Caleb Williams able to come out in the first drive of the game, score a touchdown, rushing touchdown. Just seemed like, all the, so-called, if we talk about Caleb Williams, which, definitely got to check these guys out too, man. Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, man, at Firebox 2300. My man E had an infamous rant, just about all the hate around Caleb Williams. And yeah, I had my chest poked out, after the first drive. And it just seemed like the air went out of the balloon after that. It just seemed like the Bears, after we got out of the first, 15 scripted plays, things just went left, man. But let me ask you this, man. What's your thoughts? Obviously we had a couple starters, out in that game. Jalen Johnson, Pro Bowl cornerback, Brisker just out. Do you feel like, say, those injuries affected us during the game, or you felt like it was just one of those situations where, hey, the defense started off well and we should have just been able to continue on in the second half?
It's always good to have Jalen Johnson on the field or whatnot, and Tyler Gordon. So you're missing two of our top DBs, if not two of our better DBs. And then we also mentioned that we missed TJ Edwards. If you notice that touchdown that Aaron Jones caught, Sewell was sticking him, and normally that would be TJ Edwards. So it was a lot of different things like that. But at the end of the day, we was holding our own the first half without those guys, and I felt like that should not be an excuse. Yes, if we would have had them, would things have changed? I believe so. But I feel like we still had enough to get the job done with the defensive core that we had up there at that time. Just felt like it was one of those things where offensively we kind of put we put our defense in a bad situation by going 3 and out. Pretty much the whole second half. Until maybe like the last touchdown, or maybe a couple of sequences we had where we was moving the ball, but for the most part, it seemed like we was just protecting the lead versus, staying on their throat. And that put the defense in a tough situation, especially when you don't have your better players on defense. So it's even though we would have probably did better with those defensive players, and I think that we're gonna come out much better pace against Detroit, but at the same time, that's no excuse The offense could have helped the defense at the end. And that's just in my eyes how I looked at it.
Yeah, and I think that it was just a combination of a multitude of things. Just, the offense just looking, especially in the second half, like we couldn't move the ball. I mean, we almost went through a whole quarter with no positive yards on the offensive side. And I'm just like, dude, like, what's going on? So it was interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, too, it was a team loss. Meaning that, the team kind of lost the game. Ben Johnson, obviously, in his head coaching debut with the Chicago Bears, he left some meat on the bone. There was a couple of decisions during that particular game. And, I think he's so used to being, obviously the offensive coordinator, behind Dan Campbell and his tenure in Detroit, to where, it really was his first forte of being a guy that, hey, you got a lot of responsibilities outside of just working with the quarterback and working with the offense. And I think it kind of reared itself, what we saw on Monday night. But I think that Ben is a tough guy. I think he'll be able to bounce back. I think the Bears, they're in a tough situation. Obviously, we got to go into Detroit in week number 2, try to get a win to avoid ourselves from going down not only 0-2 on the season, but 0-2 in the division. So just overall, man, is, we obviously going to get into the, rest of the NFL slate. But what's your thoughts early on, man, and just the Bears, in week number 2, facing off with the Lions and basically what we consider a grudge match in week 2?
Well, I think that the Bears are a much better team than what they were last year. I mean, it seems like we proved that in our first game. We pretty much should have won that game if we just take away any of those plays. That's why I say it was an organization fail. The whole organization just did certain things. Everybody, it's the whole team's fault. But if we would have did one little thing differently, we should have took that game and we would have felt much better going into week 2. As far as week 2, the only problem is that Detroit is coming off of an L at the same time, and it's a divisional rivalry, and we're on the road. Now, I still feel like the Bears do have enough, and I'm still confident enough to see that the Bears can overtake this game, but it's not going to be an easy one. Man, they're going to have to put some major grit into this game and have some major focus because, like I said again, Detroit is going through the same type of situation. I do feel like we do have the better team overall. They might have a little bit more offense, and as far as the running backs or maybe the receivers, but we're right there. So it's going to be a toss-up, and both teams need this game. But I'm confident that we can pull it out. I don't see us. Like I said again, we're a much better team. We still scored 24 points. We just gave up 21 straight points in the fourth quarter. You can't give up 3 touchdowns. We could change those, probably fix those issues and fix a little bit on the offensive end. Make it dummy it down for Caleb a little bit more, and also give them some help. If you see the problem is the tackles, then put some more tight ends in there and make some adjustments. So it's going to be a great game. I still feel like the Bears have what it takes, but we're going to see on Sunday.
Yeah, man, and it's just to me, it's really, I think the main thing about going up in Detroit, obviously, it's going to be loud. It's Ford Field. Detroit stand up. They definitely going to be represented, in the building. And I think that for the Bears, the main thing is really you got to be able to stop the run. I mean, these guys got 2 running backs that that get it done. They didn't have a good week 1. They got stopped by the Green Bay Packers. So I know they're going to be focused and try to come out and try to run the ball on the Bears. As we showed, we had the Swiss cheese defense in the second half. And the most embarrassing part about it all, though, is that this is the 40th year anniversary of Super Bowl 20. And they was out before the game, and to see the defense kind of put a Swiss cheese effort out, it just was a little bit embarrassing for me, man. But we move on, man. Obviously week number 2 is in the fold. We had a great week number 1. What was your thoughts, man? I just want to get your thoughts, obviously, just on that whole situation, man, with the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, man. What was your thoughts, man, on that game, obviously, as Buffalo was able to come back from the dead, man, and knock off the Ravens, man, up there in Buffalo in week 1?
Man, I just look at it like two teams that's, striving for the same goal, and that's to win a Super Bowl. I mean, a lot of people want to put blame on Baltimore for the comeback, but if you watch the game completely like I did, I mean, it wasn't like Baltimore was stopping Buffalo, not pretty much the whole game and vice versa. Just came down to that turnover that Derrick Henry did, man. I mean, that was something that rarely happens, and it was unfortunate for him. It just seems like something about Baltimore, kind of another type of team like that. I mean, not like the Bears per se as far as records and wins and losses, but in their upper echelons, it seems like they can't get it together when it comes to those big prime time games or that big heavy game. For some reason, they always find a way to lose at the end. But I give both teams credit. You know, you talked about the best two quarterbacks in the league, hands down, along with Patrick Mahomes. So for me, it was just one of those things where, you know, these are two teams that you're going to see those type of high power scoring when you're going up against these guys, because Josh Allen, he like the new MJ when it comes to controlling the game. He know what he's doing out there. He kind of understand what defenses are doing. And then vice versa with, you know, with the two-headed monster, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I mean, it's not going to be between teams that's going to be able to stop them when they on their A game and they're going up against those major teams. And they focus. So it's tough for defense when you're dealing with those type of teams right there. So that was kind of like my major take on it. You know, to me, it was a great game. It was good for the NFL to just start it off, the first Sunday night football game. And I'm looking to see more great games like this. I didn't take it too tough on those defenses like everybody else does, because you're talking about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. So that was my biggest take on it, man. I love what I'm seeing with both teams, pretty much.
Man, speaking of heavyweight fights, heavyweight contender type fights, you know, we got the rematch of the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles, man, travel out to Arrowhead and take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Last time we seen these two teams play, you know, it was straight, you know, a knockout, stop the fight, throw the towel early in the game. And to me, it was interesting, you know, what I seen from the Super Bowl that really was kind of scary from a Kansas City perspective. And I obviously get your thoughts on it. But I knew that game was over in the first 10 minutes, because what jumped out at me was Philadelphia had them figured out. And to me, bro, that is scary from a standpoint of, I think most people will agree that the Philadelphia Eagles, from a talent standpoint, from top to bottom, probably is a better roster, you know, than the Kansas City Chiefs. But once I saw the Super Bowl, that one, they obviously weren't intimidated by the Kansas City Chiefs. And two, schematically, they had them figured out. And so, to me, what's your thoughts, man, on this, you know, Super Bowl rematch, man? You know, obviously this is the third, you know, they played in the last, you know, 2 out of the last 3 Super Bowls with these two teams, man. What's your thoughts, man, on that clip with the Chiefs, man, and the Eagles this weekend?
Man, I think it's going to be one of those great matchups, too. A lot of people are picking the Eagles at the time, you know, and rightfully so. I feel like Kansas City, you know, they're not getting any younger when it comes to like their main pieces, and they're down. Xavier Worthy, I don't think he's going to be playing this week. He has his dislocated shoulder. And you got Rice, he's not playing also. And right now, you know, you talking about the Super Bowl champions. I just feel like, man, the Chiefs. It's kind of like it's kind of like somebody was just mentioning today. I was watching. I forgot who it was, but he said, back in the days when Tyson was knocking everybody out that first round or whatever, and then he went up against Buster Douglas. So it's kind of like the Chiefs is kind of like they got that Buster Douglas that last Super Bowl, and now from there it kind of went all downhill. I'm not saying that the Chiefs is over and done with, but I feel like they got to regroup. They have to regroup. I don't see them in the same stratosphere right now as the Philadelphias of the world and so on other teams right now. I'm not going to mention those names yet, but at least for this particular game, I just don't see the Chiefs doing anything close with the Eagles, because the Eagles got that run game, and I don't see them stopping it. And the Chiefs' offense is not what it used to be. So I'm looking at a double-digit lead, at least a double-digit victory this coming Sunday.
Yeah, man, and it's funny too. Whoever said that take on, you know, Tyson and Douglas, I swear they stole my take. You know, straight robbed me. But because that's where I was, you know, where I was going with it. I just think that one, it was the intimidation factor is gone, but the most thing that kind of threw me for a loop when I watched the Super Bowl was like, they got y'all figured out. They know, hey, we'll put bracket coverage on Travis Kelce. We got him straight. We know Pacheco and Hunt like to run to the edges. We got about 10 defensive linemen. We rotated the game, so they always going to be, you know, fresh on the field. We know if Patrick Mahomes, if he try to, you know, run it to the outside, if we keep a spy there, he going to come back to the middle of the field, as we saw in the Super Bowl. Interception by Cooper DeJean, interception by Braun. So to me, I think the real key to that matchup is that obviously with Kansas City being down a few players is that what kind of adjustments and counters can Kansas City throw at Philadelphia? I don't know. Obviously, Philadelphia's, defense, to me, they kind of had, an iffy situation in week number 1 against the Dallas Cowboys, but that's week number 1. So we'll definitely see. Man, before we get out of here, man, definitely got to show some love, man. Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, man. You can definitely check me out, on a few hardwire segments for their season number 5, man. Man, go ahead and spit game, man, on what you and Macro got going on at the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast this year, man.
Man, it's just a blessing. It's just a blessing to be during the 5th season, man. We still going hard. This is going to be our best season up and coming, man. This is season 5 right here. We got the hard wire where we trying to get a lot of guests that know their sports knowledge. And it's called the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast. So we do give you some jewels on and tips on how to spend your money and do your sports betting the wisely way. We're not gonna pick your best play, but we're gonna give you some advice and give you some sneaks what you could do to make ends meet or whatnot. And then also, man, just that we also give back to these small businesses out here of the world. We do a lot of promotions with these companies that's trying to build. We're trying to support each other, and that's what it's all about. So it's a lot of stuff that's gonna be in tune. We got the best sports guys out here, journalists out here, like my man T-Knot right here. He's gonna be on that show hopefully today. And we're gonna keep this thing moving, keep this train rolling.
Oh, man. So, man, once again, man, I appreciate the check-in, man. Once again, we definitely got to connect, gang, man. We both in season number 5 right now, man. So, once again, man, I appreciate you definitely falling through. Coming up, man, I got the rest of the show. I'm going to break down in, pretty much the big games in week number 2 across the whole slate of the National Football League. Once again, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast Spot. Welcome back. And as promised, we're going to get into the National Football League Week 2 look as we mosey on to lovely weekend pastures and football again on the college as well as the NFL side. And NFL's week number 2, week number 1 was exciting just to see football again, man. Just that whole swag for most folks. Football season, beginning of it represents the beginning really of fall for most folks. The holidays is over until we get into, more the Christmas holidays and so forth. Thanksgiving as well in that mixture. But man, Thursday night games, I got to tip my cap to the National Football League because they did a good job, early on. And, they went through the whole revamp thing of Thursday night football a couple years ago to get more primetime matches in the slot. And I think that the National Football League has done an outstanding job because we got a tilt on Thursday jumping off the week. The Washington Commanders come in 1-0 against the Green Bay Packers 1-0. There's been a lot of folks that's real high on the Packers, especially after their performance, what we saw in week number 1 against the Detroit Lions. And I mentioned it a couple episodes back, for season number 5. It really was all on Jordan Love. To me, it's about, if the Packers want to get to where they want to get to, and that's ultimately the Super Bowl, is that Love has to play at that bottom tier level, tier 2 level. Really bottom tier 1 level, to be quite honest with you, meaning that he has to be a top 10 quarterback and a consistent quarterback. And also last season, he battled with injuries. And so this year, want to see him at healthy tilt. And he looked good in week number 1 against the Detroit Lions. Now, Detroit, they're a whole nother situation, just losing both coordinators. I knew that there was going to be, a learning curve for their whole situation, meaning that I didn't see them winning the same amount of games this season, as they did last season coming in anyway. But the Packers look dominant on defense. It was week 1, so I'm not going to sit here and just, build them a statue of, 85 Chicago Bears type defense, but they look good. Rashawn Gary especially looked good. Michael Parsons, he came in, did his job, got him a sack and so forth. And so I like what I saw more so on the defensive end more than the offensive end. And so the Packers, they riding high. A lot of people have them as they shotgun favorite of, getting to the Super Bowl this season. And they got a real contest in the Washington Commanders. Last year's team, Dan Quinn, first year, you got Jaden Daniels in the building. And so this is a team and an organization, with a new ownership that turned the page. And we saw it last season. This year coming in now, sophomore season for Jaden Daniels, I thought they played well, getting that victory in week number 1. Jaden Daniels, he looked, as advertised in week number 1. Then we had the emergence of the youngster, young Cross Merritt, most nobly known as a Bill. Had a good game in his debut. Running back, the Washington Commanders moved on from Brian Robinson Jr., traded him out to San Francisco with the 49ers. And so both these teams are contenders in the NFC without question. Both these teams have a shot at getting to the Super Bowl out of the NFC, no question. And this is a good litmus test, man, on Thursday Night Football just to see what it do. And as always, man, we got to give our little twist and our little prediction just in regards to the game. I just feel because the game is played in Lambeau Field, I'm going to favor the Green Bay Packers. Now, there's a 3.5 point, favorite in this football game. I think that's fair in a sense. I mean, that obviously Vegas is slick because I think that, the Packers will probably win this game by a field goal. But there's no really shade on the Washington Commanders. I think they have better days, but I got the Packers in this one. It's just that, to me, when both teams are close, I most notably lean to the home team unless we got some key injuries going into the game. So, yeah, I got the Packers, man, winning at home, man, and a nice little close tilt. I even throw a score at you. I got 24-21, man, Packers at home. Another notable game, and a lot of people feel that I'm going to be a homer, and we might as well go ahead and get this over with. Yeah, I'm talking about my Chicago Bears taking on the Detroit Lions. This game will be played at Ford Field. We seen Ben Johnson, the former offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, have his coaching debut, last weekend and, Monday Night Football. And, we know how that all went, man. Don't take me back down memory road with that whole situation. But say less. This is a matchup between two teams that are looking for a win in the NFC North, which a lot of people feel is the best division in the National Football League. The Lions, they just looked like an enigma last week. They just looked like they had no continuity on the offensive side of the ball as well as on the defensive side of the ball, and it reared its ugly head. When you lose two big-time coordinators, especially guys that move on head coaching jobs in prime, cities and fan bases, yeah, you're going to take a little cut off the top, as they would say. My Bears, it was just good first half, terrible second half. Ben Johnson didn't make any adjustments against the Minnesota Vikings on the offensive side. Declan, who was officially the offensive coordinator, they just had no counters when, they turned up the heat from the Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores with the blitz. This is going to be an interesting game because this is two thirsty teams, two teams that definitely do not want to go 0-2 to start the season, meaning it could be an uphill climb in the NFC North if you go 0-2, especially going 0-2 within the division. So this is a grudge match game. This is why I previewed it. They got Detroit, man, a 7-point, favorite just in regards of it. Boy, stop. Don't think that the Lions, especially what I saw off last week, is a 7-point favorite against the Bears. It's really all about Jalen Johnson, him being in the lineup, Brisker being in the lineup. We'll see what it do, for those two gentlemen that definitely are needed. Where's Grady Jarrett at, on the defensive side of the ball? The line, protected the run, did a good job against the run. In the first half of the game against the Vikings, just fell off a cliff in the second half. The Lions got the two-head monster with Gibbs and Montgomery. I think that's the key to the game for the Chicago Bears. I'm a lean Bears. Here's why I'm a lean Bears. Because I think that, Ben Johnson, he knows this team. He knows this organization. I think that the Bears overall as a team is going to be a little bit more thirsty. And I just think that the Lions, they're still trying to find an identity. Not saying that the Bears have a super identity. I just think that the Lions are still trying to find it. I think this is a close game as well. I see the Bears, man, pulling this one out, man. I got the Bears winning this game. I got 28-24. I think it will be some offense in this game because I think both defenses are still trying to kind of find themselves. But I got the Bears, man, 28-24. Then we get into another interesting matchup. This is an interesting matchup from a standpoint of we saw this team last week have the best, victory of the week. And I'm talking about the Buffalo Bills. They take on the New York Football Jets. This game is going to be played at MetLife Stadium. The Jets came oh so close last week, oh so close against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Justin Fields made his debut as the quarterback of the New York Jets. You know, the boy looked good. I'm just going to say that. You know, I think the Steelers who came in, you know, touted as one of the better defenses of the National Football League. I'm not sure what happened in week number 1. And there's a lot of questions just on that front, you know, from a Pittsburgh perspective. But I like what I saw from the Jets. I like the offense. I like some of the balance. You know, Aaron Glenn, you know, former player in the National Football League. You know, I remember when he got drafted in the NFL. But I just think that Buffalo, to me, I think off that big-time victory, and this team is, you know, basically a 7-point favorite, you know, going on the road. You know, I think Buffalo will be able to handle their business against the Jets. I just think that it's a pecking order in the AFC, especially in, you know, just teams like Buffalo, who's in what I consider the heavyweight division. I think that the Jets will be competitive against them, no question about it. But interesting thing about the Bills is that, you know, they can win any kind of way. They can win in high-scoring games. They can win in kind of low-scoring games. As long as they got, you know, number 17 in the backfield, that quarterback, man, Josh Allen, you know, they can win any kind of game. You know, I got the Bills in this one. But the reason I wanted to put this game on the forefront, because I think it'll be a good watch, too, man. It's in the early window, man, on CBS at 1 o'clock. So, you know, I'm definitely going to be checking that game out, man. But, you know, I got the Bills in that one, man. You know, obviously I might as well give you guys a score. You know, I got the Bills, you know, winning this game. I don't think they'll get 40 points this week. I got the Bills winning this game, man, 27-13 Bills. Then we mosey on, man. We going to mosey on. We're going to keep it in the AFC. We got the Denver Broncos, man, traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Indianapolis Colts. These are two teams that was what I consider trying to get their weight up in the AFC. Now, the Denver Broncos, this is a team that Sean Payton, he was able to get this organization back into the playoffs. Bo Nix had a great rookie season last year. This is a defense that, you know, a young defense, a hungry defense, and might be by the end of the season the best defense in the National Football League. You got Daniel Jones, made his debut last week. The boy looked good. I mean, the boy looked good last week. Now, you know, especially my OGs, man, I've been just straight critical of Daniel Jones since he arrived in New York. But for some players, you know, a change of scenery is a good thing. And, you know, we saw with the balance, just when with the offense, Jonathan Taylor looking like Jonathan Taylor, you know, Alex Pierce catching a nice little long catch, man, last week. You know, I watched that steamroll against the Miami Dolphins, man, that the Colts put up. And, you know, they back at home, you know, once again. And this is a real interesting because, you know, it's basically about a, you know, 1-2 point, you know, favorite Denver coming into this game. But to me, this is a pick 'em. This is a pick 'em. And to me, I'm a favor of Denver in this one on the road. You know, I'm just going to go with that because I think that the Denver Broncos got the better defense. You know, I think that Daniel Jones, I'm not sure how long that glass slipper is going to last. You know, he looked good last week, but he's playing up against a way better defensive unit than the Denver Broncos. I think Denver, they was able to run the ball last week. Rookie R.J. Harvey, you know, had a nice little debut for them. So I think they'll be a little bit more balanced in this football game. But this is a classic, you know, what I call maybe we contenders in the AFC low-key. So I think it'll be a good watch. This game coming on at that 4 o'clock window. You know, I got the Denver Broncos, man, in this game. I got Denver, you know, winning this boy. I got Denver 24-14 Denver just in this one, man, as they get their second victory of the season. And you know I ain't finna get out of here before we preview the Super Bowl rematch, 425 on Fox. And you got the Philadelphia Eagles traveling out to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. As I mentioned, this is two teams. Last time we saw them play against each other was in the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles steamrolled the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes was running for his life. They just couldn't get no offense jumped off, and they couldn't stop the Philadelphia Eagles. And Eagles just looked like a better organization, top to bottom, just from a talent standpoint. And I'm not trying to rail on the Kansas City Chiefs, but when you win the division 10 straight years, when you go to all these Super Bowls, there's a collateral damage in that. Part of that collateral damage is that some of your older players are nicked up. You got Rashid Rice out on suspension. You got, you know, my man Worthy, wide receiver, you know, got, you know, ran into by Travis Kelce. You know, he's out, you know, with a separated shoulder. That may be multiple weeks. And so this team, this is a big game for the Kansas City Chiefs. And here's why. In the National Football League, it's a physical sport. It's, some of the best athletes just in the world. And a lot of times, football is kind of a microcosm for other sports and, other mechanisms. And as I mentioned before, this is a heavyweight matchup. And I just think that the Chiefs, I'm not going to say it's a must-win game, but I just don't think that this is a team that can come down from being 0-2 on the season, especially with, your best playmaker on offense. And Rashid Rice ain't finna be back no time soon, and Worthy look like he's going to be out for a short little stint. This is a must-win game for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Vegas got this one as a pick'em, basically. Philadelphia 1.5, 2-point favorite just in this football game. Philadelphia, they didn't look, top-notch when they took on the Dallas Cowboys last week. But I think that because all the pressure is to me on the Kansas City Chiefs, I think the Philadelphia Eagles playing with house money. And I also feel like we saw last season in the Super Bowl is that Philadelphia got the Kansas City Chiefs mapped out pretty good. Now, Hollywood Brown, he kind of comes into a bigger fold in the light. Juju Smith-Schuster, we'll see if he's able to kind of contribute a little bit more. We'll see if we, get a little bit more out of Travis Kelce this week as well. Patrick Mahomes, he's got to play at that level, but I think that the Philadelphia Eagles might have figured out the cheat code against the Kansas City Chiefs. I really believe that. I think they figured out, and to me, normally I would go with the Chiefs, one being at the crib, two, they know it's a must-win game because they don't want to go down 0-2. But I think that the Philadelphia Eagles showed us in the Super Bowl last year is that they got this team kind of mapped out a little bit. And so we'll see what it do. I got the Eagles favored in this game. I'm going to go as far as just saying this, man. I got the Philadelphia Eagles, winning this football game. I got them winning this, boy, 27-17 Eagles, man, going on the road out there in Arrowhead and handling business against the Kansas City Chiefs. And we got, the Monday night tilts. We're going to get into the Monday night tilts. We got the Bucks, Monday night doubleheader, by the way. Got the Tampa Bay Bucks going down to H-Town. Houston, what it do? Taking on the Houston Texans. Houston coming in this game 0-1. Bucks 1-0. Big time win against the Atlanta Falcons last week. Baker Mayfield making it do what it do down here in Atlanta, where I'm, located at presently with the pod. Baker Mayfield looked good last week. He looked like typical Baker Mayfield. Now, the Tampa Bay Bucks, their team with various injuries as well. They got to kind of try to figure it out. And I was kind of looking at, them playing against the Atlanta Falcons last week, just kind of how their offense will go. I think that, Baker's the captain of the ship, obviously. But Ibuka showed himself last week. The young rookie out of Ohio State, caught 2 touchdowns last week. He showed what time it was, man. And I think that, especially once you get kind of guys healthy, Chris Godwin, once he kind of get back into the fold, this could be a dangerous team. This could be a sneaky team in the NFC, especially if they get into a playoff situation, depending on the matchups. Thing about the Bucks is, though, I just want to look at their defense, man. I'm just kind of watching their defense with an eagle eye, because if they're able to get balance on the defensive side and what the high-powered offense that this team potentially can have, the Bucks might be able to make a run this year, man. We got to see what it do. Now, for Houston's standpoint, they didn't look good last week. The offense didn't look good last week. C.J. Stroud handled the 200 yards, man, no touchdowns and an interception. We had Nick Chubb into the fold in the backfield. And shout out to Nick Chubb, man. Hats off to Nick Chubb, especially, man. This man has had about 800 ACL injuries. Being able to bounce back, man, just to get on the football field again as a player with being productive, just to say the least. I think that the Texans, a lot of people feel that their defense is top notch. I mean, they got players, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley Jr. I like the youthfulness in DeMarco Ryans. I think he's a good young head football coach, but they don't want to go down 0-2 either. And I think that the Texans, just with all that heat on them, I think they win this game at home. They're basically a field goal favorite at the crib. I think it's going to be one of those games that come down to the very end, just to say the least. And I think that the Texans will be able to pull this one out. I got the Texans winning this game, man. I got the Texans winning it 28-24. The Texans pull this one off. In the second half, or the second, part of that doubleheader on Monday night, we got the Los Angeles Chargers, fresh off that knockoff victory of the Kansas City Chiefs in week number 1 out in Brazil. They take on the Las Vegas Raiders. Pete Carroll, man, congratulations to him getting his first victory last week, man, for the Raiders. This is a classic, rivalry, man, to go back AFC West, style. This game we played out in Las Vegas. Two most notable head ball coaches in Jim Harbaugh, obviously Pete Carroll. The Chargers and Justin Herbert looked good last week. This is a team that, they're going to try to be balanced running the football. And Murray Hampton made his debut last week. He looked, good in spots. I thought he, could have ran the ball a little bit better. But, we got Jim with him, man. Jimbo going to get him right. We'll see what it do. On the other side, you got Ashton Genty. You had the debut of Geno Smith as the quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders last week. Geno's a trusty veteran, man. Went out there and threw for over 360 yards last week. So Geno going to throw that thing when in doubt. And so this one, to me, I think the Raiders going to play the Chargers tough. And one thing about it, and this Charger team over the last maybe 2 years or so, they've been a team that for every good victory they have, sometimes they'll play to the competition a little bit. And to me, I'm kind of leaning towards that. Chargers, 3.5 point favorites in this game by Vegas. But I do think the Chargers do win this game, man. I just think, Jimbo Harbaugh, man, I think that, that confidence in Justin Herbert, just to also see, Keenan Allen back into the fold, old trusty but goody veteran. I like the chemistry that I saw from the Chargers offense. I think it'll be able to get him over the hump in this football game. I like the Chargers, man. 31-17 in that one. And that wrap up my week one look, my week one previews, man. Coming up, we got the rest of the show jumping off. First and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot.